Hello, Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee. My name is Patrick Tuohey. I'm a senior fellow with the Show Me Institute. You have a printed copy of my testimony. I'm not going to read it. I just want to hit a few highlights. There was talk previously about economic development impacts. The Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis published a study saying the vast majority, if not all, of these impact studies that you have heard about today are deeply flawed. Oftentimes, they are also prepared by the people asking you for subsidies. I can answer more questions about that if you would like. We also heard about pride, and certainly this hearing and the Senate hearing talked an awful lot about the ability of teams to bring us together and for us to feel pride. But I want to point out and remind all of you that the people of Jackson County, Missouri, who have perhaps the most to lose or the most to gain by the presence of these teams, voted down the sales tax to give them what they wanted. It had nothing to do, by the way, with property tax. It had everything to do with the fact that the teams were asking for a great deal of money and offering us nothing in return. I think this entire special session and this deal is an absolute hustle. The package of STAR bonds offered by Kansas is not at all competitive, and there's plenty of reporting on this. Kansas refuses to put public taxpayer money to back up the bonds if they don't generate enough tax revenue, and that means that investors are not going to be interested in buying this. And let me refer to you to the two gentlemen who speak for the Kansas legislature. Ty Masterson, president of the Kansas Senate, said in a radio interview just a few days ago, asked whether or not he'd extend past June 30. He said, "We will if we feel like we're still in the game. You know, we could see some extension, but I don't think there's a lot of interest to do that just to do it." Dan Hawkins, the Speaker of the Kansas House, told the Kansas City Star, "My opinion is you extend it, it just gives them, the teams, just gives them more time to leverage against Missouri. So why do we want to do that?" I suggest to you those are not the statements of two men who are in serious conversations with the teams. These are men who are realizing that the state of Kansas has been played simply so that the teams can, in the old border war fashion, get more subsidies out of Kansas. This deadline simply means that the Kansas offer ends. The absolute worst time for Missouri to offer, to make an offer, is during that time. You should wait until after the 30th, see if Kansas wants to extend. But the idea that the Chiefs and the Royals are dictating a deadline to the Missouri legislature is crazy, especially when John Sherman, the owner of the Royals, has missed time and again his own deadlines for sharing information about the team's plans. Second of all, and it's been talked about earlier, if the legislature were to pass this by June 30, the teams haven't committed to anything. They would go to Clay County and they would go to Jackson County, and they would play those counties against each other, just like all these companies do. And they might try to get Kansas to extend to play the game as well. But Clay County may not be able to put something on the ballot until November. And last night we learned that the Jackson County legislative president says he doesn't anticipate a vote in Jackson County until 2026. So this is a mirage. The Missouri legislature and the Kansas legislature are being hustled by teams who desperately want to create a sense of competition. They want to shorten your time frame to be able to consider it with a false deadline, and they want as many taxpayer subsidies as they can get. And let me make this point too. When we talk about pride, when we talk about I love our teams, when we talk about how much it means to Missouri, understand this: the teams do not love us back. This is a bottom line deal for them. And they are telling us, if you want us to stay, if you want our love, it's going to cost you. And there's a word for that, and it's nothing that the Missouri legislature should participate in. Thank you for your time.
Are there questions for this? Yes, please, Representative Johnson.
To inquire, Madam Chair.
Proceed.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, gentlemen. Quick question. Have you sat down with the team owners or the leadership of those teams?
No, I've been asked that a number of times. They don't show up. They don't show up to debates. They don't come to hearings. I'd love to visit with them, but they have other things to do.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions? Yes, Representative Ely.
Just to inquire.
Proceed.
Show Me Institute. So did you do all your research based in St. Louis?
Well, I work out of the Kansas City office.
Okay.
So it depends. Sometimes we will hire people out of state, academics. We've used professors at North Carolina State University, for example. We've used people in Virginia. So usually what we do is if there's a topic we're interested in that we think is important to Missouri, we'll find the best person in the country to do that study. They may not physically be located in St. Louis. But our office, our physical plant, and most of our employees are located in St. Louis.
Okay, so I'm curious about your comment on that you think that the stadium issue wasn't tied to the property tax issue. What are you basing that opinion on?
Living in Jackson County, spending months talking to people of Jackson County, listening to people in Jackson County, both from, Eastern Jack to Kansas City, people on the left and the right and the center politically who looked at this deal and were frustrated that they did not have a lease agreement. They did not know what the teams themselves were willing to spend. They did not have community benefits agreement. We were simply being asked for, by the way, a very concrete number is being asked of the taxpayers, while the benefit is pride, it's vague, it's ephemeral. And people overwhelmingly reacted negatively to that. And by the way, it wasn't close. It was a 16-point blowout.
Okay, yes, I'm from the Jackson County area also. So my next question to you is: so when you talk about just that, you don't think this is an economic impact bill, right?
I don't think the teams have a significant economic impact at all, and I can explain that. But no, I don't.
Okay, explain it.
So what these economic impact studies do, and thank you for the question, is they confuse having one more choice of how to spend your economic dollars with spending those economic dollars at all. So, for example, if a restaurant in your community closes, you don't starve to death. You go to a different restaurant or you make dinner at home. If one of your entertainment options goes away, you don't not spend those entertainment dollars. You go to something else. For example, and that's called substitution effect. If a grocery store opens up across the street from your house, you may shop at that new grocery store, but you do not also continue shopping at your previous grocery store, right? So your spending is exactly, it's flat. There's no change. But economic development researchers count all the new spending and the jobs at the new grocery store location, and they never, and believe me, this is absolutely true, it sounds crazy, they do not subtract the lack of spending or jobs at the old location. So you are told as legislators, and I am told as a voter, that something more has happened, when in fact it's net zero. We've just moved activity from one place to another. If we move the Royals from where they are now to downtown, economic activity that happens now, for example, you'll stop at a restaurant or a grocery store on your way to the park to tailgate. Now you just change that activity to downtown, and by the way, because there won't be parking, there won't be tailgating. So you will spend that same amount of money at restaurants and bars downtown, at restaurants and bars that John Sherman owns. You understand the economic spending doesn't change, but it all goes into his pocket as a result of a new stadium, whereas before it went to the price chopper or it went to the liquor store that he doesn't own. So again, we see new spending, but it isn't additional spending.
Okay, so this is not to be disrespectful to you at all, because I do appreciate you coming out here in your time talking. I know Councilman Wes Rogers came up here. He talked about the impact that would have on the local businesses for like restaurants and stuff like that if they do leave, and he cited studies in his testimony. So right now, at least I don't know if you have it in here. I'm hearing a lot of what I heard during the time of the vote last April. It sounds like a lot of fear mongering. You're trying to incite people to. I'm telling you what I'm hearing, my perception.
Yeah. Because
from my understanding, and I wish that the Department of Revenue lady was back in here to explain how this process works. I don't see how. That may not have worked in April. What that proposal was. This proposal was not putting anything, to my understanding, in somebody's pockets right off. This is not an appropriation that we're asking for. We're giving the teams an option to stay here for the long term. So I don't see how that ties into last year's April's proposals.
Okay.
And I don't see how that's not an economic incentive for them to stay here, because I do tend to agree that if they leave, they abandon where they are now in Kansas, those surrounding areas are going to go with them. And you could be right, I could be right. We won't know until 5 years from now. But I don't believe we should be voting based on something that's conjecture or fear in your head or in my head, instead of giving the teams an opportunity to stay here to compete with these other states who have real plans on paper that, hey, we want you to come here. This is our proposal. We should have something also. And for the pride point, I mean, you can walk in any restaurant and bar in Kansas City, you see Chiefs and Royal stuff. The number one comment people get when they visit here, even if you're from an East Coast state, whatever, you say, why is there so many sports themed bars here? That's a big cultural thing in Kansas City. For you to say that just because the voters voted no on something at that point of time, because at that time you did have a lot of rush talking points. You had business owners who, in my opinion, are not in politics, so they didn't give the best spins. Could have done a lot better. But the voters themselves are still true fans of the Royals and the Chiefs, and I don't think that they want them to leave.
No, I don't.
Wait. And so to give them so I think that all this body is doing is trying to provide an opportunity. Actually, can I call her back up here, Madam Chairwoman? Am I able to call her back up here? Yes. I am. No?
We will do I'm sorry. We will do for informational purposes at the end again.
Okay.
And that way, because I know that you're concerned and she has great information.
Great information. And so, like I said, not to disrespect you, I just think that your points are targeted to these what ifs, these conjecturals, and not allowing the opportunity for us to give these, the teams to stay here.
The teams have the opportunity to stay here. Nothing is stopping them. In fact, their current contract, they could extend for 5 years and then another 5 years without having to come back to the county. They can do that.
Well, I don't speak for the team, so I don't know what their decision making is.
They're free.
But I do know this is a real thing for us to be figuring out right now.
So they're free to stay as long as they want. What they're asking for is money to do it. They want more taxpayer money to do it than they are getting now. And I am telling you that
this is still not giving. Okay, so even if I think me and the lady from the Department of Revenue talked about this. So how do you define giving taxpayer money? Like what
Sure.
Explain that, because in my opinion, nobody is getting a written check from the state saying, hey, this is your money. The money is already being collected and put into a general revenue pot.
Okay.
Being set aside as in the form of a bond to give back to a team. I could be wrong about that, and I'm going to ask for some clarification from the lady when she comes back up here. Go ahead.
So, under the status quo, as things are right now, teams pay taxes. Those taxes are collected and spent on whatever the state chooses to spend it on. Post-adoption of this bill, that money will be collected and then given back to the teams to offset the cost of construction or to pay for bonds. So yes, somebody will be getting a check from the state. That isn't happening now. So you may say it's zero net as far as the state's budget is concerned, but the fact is it's a $50 million hole blown in the state budget for 30 years.
But the point is, and I think you just said it, even if they get the money back, they're paying their own taxes, right? We pay our own taxes. Where else is the money going to go? It possibly go to other projects. That's not guaranteed. It depends on who's in charge of on the budget at those point in times.
Well, the gentleman from the Chamber of Commerce made it very clear where this money goes. It pays for services, basic services.
Well, I mean, that's all good in theory, but we have to go through a whole budget process up here to figure out how we utilize money. And so just to say that, okay, they're giving so to me, saying that we're using taxpayers' money, you're trying it's like you're saying that this is a robbery of taxpayers.
Some say it is.
I mean, you say it is, but in the reverse, you're not getting the money back in the form of any other payment anyway. Like, I'm not going to get additional money in my pockets because I decided to not vote for this. It's not coming back to me personally as a taxpayer.
Right, but the money that the state no longer has because of this bill will either have to result in cuts in services or increase in taxes elsewhere. So that even if you live in Cape Girardeau, you are in effect subsidizing the Chiefs and Royals to stay in Missouri.
And then on the other side, if you take that argument, if they do leave and the money's not there in the first place, then what do you do?
Well, so Mr. Rogers, by the way, who testified a short minute ago, didn't cite any economic studies, actually, because I want to know what he was reading. But, so you can say that because Kansas City has what few markets have, which is a state line dividing it, that actually money that moves or economic activity that moves a few blocks or a few miles does have an impact. All right, so that's a fair argument. But then we are back to where we were in 2019 with a border war, where we are using economic policy and incentive policy to move businesses back and forth across state line. And everybody, I mean, even the Kansas City Chamber of Commerce, which doesn't like to give up a taxpayer dollar at all, said that the border war was damaging for everybody.
So what do you think is going on right now?
What I think is going on right now is that this body is being played by the Chiefs and the Royals. They want to create a false deadline and a false sense that the teams could leave. I'm telling you, the teams aren't going anywhere.
I have no further questions. I just think that's fear-mongering. Thank you.
Yes. Additional questions? Representative Haruza.
To inquire.
Proceed.
So, a couple of things that you mentioned. You know, right now the teams at least do seem to say that they do have offers on the table. That I believe. I know you believe they are not serious offers. I would say I would differ on that opinion. Actually, Salt Lake City and Tennessee, actually, those offers are valued at about close to $1 billion. Kansas City one, Kansas is about $750 million.
The deals for different teams, like the Titans, you mean, for example?
No, I'm talking about the teams. There's an offer. The Royals have offers.
I am not aware of
Okay.
any offers the Royals had, and I'll tell you this, if they had received an offer from another market, we in this room would all know about it.
Okay, so I'm just still a couple more questions on that. So I may have gotten the incorrect information, but you mentioned substitution.
Yes, sir.
Well, the whole idea here is that we are competing with other states.
Yes.
This is Kansas in this case. So if there's a substitution, the team moves to the Kansas side of things, then, yeah, the money goes to Kansas. And what we're trying to do here is to keep the money, the business, the
Right.
economic development, all that in Missouri. So that is, I thought, the purpose of the bill, to keep that money here.
That is the rhetoric underpinning the bill. I am telling you that based on what the legislative leader in Kansas are saying publicly, there is no serious negotiation they have with the Royals or the Chiefs, and that they are beginning to realize that they were just encouraged to make an offer to create a competitive environment so that we'd be here today offering incentives. It happens all the time. A year ago, we were told about how the Royals might move to Nashville. Nashville did not want a team. Nashville wanted an expansion team. They weren't interested in taking the Royals. But this fear-mongering, to the gentleman's point, happens all the time. So I understand your argument about substitution. I'm simply saying the Star Bond offer from Kansas is not competitive with what the teams were getting even without this bill, because they will not be able to sell those Star Bonds on the open market because there is so much risk. And there's so much risk because Star Bonds do not involve getting money from the state. It's basically a large TIF.
So you're putting us at a it's almost like your word. It's sort of like you're saying, well, this is where you see it.
Yeah.
That's your analysis. So we're playing high stakes poker here, and so the
appreciate
question
that.
is, who's bluffing?
Right. No, I absolutely appreciate that. I would encourage you. I don't know if anybody in the Missouri legislature has spoken to anyone in the Kansas legislature about this. I would encourage that because it seems that both bodies are communicating with each other through the Chiefs and the Royals, who have every incentive to, I mean, look, if I owned either team, I'd be doing exactly what they would do. I'd try to scare the hell out of you that we're leaving.
One other comment is on the you mentioned, that of course they don't love us back, and
Yeah.
of course, and they shouldn't love us back. They're business. They're in business to make money, and That's what their business is. So that's why this bill has in it this lock-in period, so that they don't do what Rams did to us. Are you comfortable that the lock-in period is there reasonable, or is that also one that
Look,
wouldn't work?
the teams will do whatever's good for them at the moment. If at some point they want to introduce legislation to change that 30-year lock-in, they will. I think it's a matter of looking at what's before us right now and what's best for Missouri, and playing this game is not good for Missourians.
Yes, Representative Amato.
To inquire.
Proceed.
Sir, I respect your position. I respect your coming here and giving us information. This hearing is not a debate, and it's turned into kind of a debate situation here, and I would ask everybody from refrain from doing that, because that's not what this decorum is all about. Number one. Number two, the vote that happened, is all supposition on your part, our part. We all have an opinion why it failed and why the percentage, whether there's going to be a package put together for local participation, and we'll all find out if it wins or loses. But I will make one comment. And my comment is, I'm on the St. Louis side of the state, so the Royals is not a team that I follow. I follow the Cardinals. But I guarantee you, my wife does most of the grocery shopping in my house. I do some, but she does most of it, because she says I don't pick out the meat very well. So she thinks she does a better job at that. But I guarantee you, sir, I have never been there when she gets ready to go to the grocery store, as you used as an analogy. And I say, you're going to the grocery store? Have you got your Kansas City Chiefs apparel on? Or have you got your Cardinal apparel on before you leave the house? Sir, there is a pride effect in these teams being in these communities. Kansas City is considered a major league city that's drawn the soccer tournament that they're having and all that. And I'm sure that if Kansas City didn't have these two professional sports teams, the chances of them getting that would have went down dramatically. You heard testimony already that the amateur sports tax credit is helping them tremendously in that side of the state because of these two professional sports teams. So, sir, that's my comment. I thank you for your testimony. It's not a debate, and I respect your opinion.
Representative Martin.
Yeah, for inquiry.
Proceed.
Yeah, thank you for being here. A quick question, as far as some of these comments brings up in my mind, one of my concerns, just the basic supposition of this bill is this a basic role of government in this situation? Is this something that government really should be involved in? And return on investment, things like that. Tons of businesses. My business has grown, and so I could say, well, I've if I got government subsidies like this, and the government paid for my equipment and gave me loans and stuff like that, well, I can give a return on investment. We could go ad nauseum on how many businesses we could say, well, they're going to have a return on investment. It just goes and goes and goes to everybody you can think of. So just speak to that on a minute regarding as far as the basic role of government in this.
My worldview is that this is not a role of government. But that is a worldview. That's not necessarily something that's informed by economic studies or things like that. What I would like Kansas City and Jackson County to do is focus exclusively on providing for public safety and infrastructure. And if they do that, good things will come. Those cities will grow. But what is happening in Kansas City and St. Louis, which has 4 downtown stadiums, and nobody is arguing that St. Louis is economically powerful as a result, is that cities and counties are getting distracted from providing those basic services, those absolutely necessary basic services. And through all these incentives, headquarters, stadiums, whatever, are hollowing out their tax base. And as a result, they are not allowed to provide, they're not able to provide basic services. And that is a long-term tragedy.
Yes. Next person is Representative Rush.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm take my question away. All right.
All right. Representative Johnson.
The gentleman, he answered my question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yay. Okay. Representative Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a question.
Proceed.
Thank you. And thank you, sir, for being here today. I definitely appreciate the passion that you've displayed. I can tell that this comes from a place of genuine interest, and this isn't just politics for you. So I can appreciate that. I was intrigued by the substitution effect discussion, which both Wes Rogers mentioned earlier and yourself as well. And so I would go so far as to say I think I agree with your assessment with the Royals aspect of what you're saying. If they move from their current spot to downtown, the money amounts that are spent doesn't necessarily change. However, the question that I really have regarding the substitution effect is if the Chiefs do cross state lines, then that substitution effect doesn't, from my perspective, and this is where I want you to kind of help me with this, my perspective is that money is no longer being spent in Missouri. It's being spent in Kansas, even if it's the same amount of money, whatever that amount is. Can you kind of walk us through what that looks like?
So, by the way, I appreciate that question because a lot of times when these economic studies happen, they're studying a team within a market where people can't just go a few blocks to go into an entirely different political subdivision. So that's important. And so you can say, yes, at some level, money that Missouri would have gotten is now going to Kansas. Of course, this bill explodes all that because Missouri is going to give away any money it's going to get as a result. So it's net zero if we pass this, if they move or not. But importantly, your particular question gets to what Kansas and Missouri have been locked in for years, if not decades, which is a border war. And it's not necessarily who wins each particular battle. You know, Applebee's moved their headquarters back and forth state line for years, and economic development professionals on either side counted it as a win each time they did it. But we all knew regionally we were losing. That's bad. But the worst part about the border war is that it encourages both states, or if you live in St. Louis, cities that abut one another, into a race to the bottom because they are so hungry for a development that they're willing to debase themselves because if we don't give them everything, the guys next door might give them everything. And both spiritually, I think that is a bad place for local governments to be. They ought to say we are a great market and you should be proud to be here. But also economically, it is absolutely disastrous. The Show Me Institute is generally right of center. We are a small government, low-tax think tank, but we absolutely understand that taxes are important to provide basic services. Deals like this look like they're conservative because they're cutting taxes, but they're not cutting everybody's taxes. They're just cutting the taxes of people with really good lobbyists.
Your last point is of interest to me, and I'm genuinely interested. So when you say it doesn't cut taxes for everybody, and I think we can see from the list of counties within the bill, because I'm assuming that's what you're getting back to, what would you prefer to see happen? Would you prefer to see that all of the counties of Missouri be included in the bill? Would you prefer to see that all counties be at the same percentage? What is it that Show Me would really want to see happen with this bill to make it to where you would be more in favor of it?
I'm hesitant to speak for the Show Me Institute on this issue because I haven't spent a lot of time on it, but I can confidently say that the Institute would want every county, every business, every person in the state to be treated exactly the same and let them make the entrepreneurial decisions of how to invest and where to live, rather than have government at the state, county, or local level pick people out and say, you're going to benefit from my policy and you're going to benefit from my policy, and hope for the best.
Thank you very much.
Yes, Representative Jacobs. You're good? All right. Any additional questions? Seeing none. Thank you so much for your testimony.